Okay, good morning, everyone. There's a bit of pressure. How well you speak depends on what happens later. And when you're described as seasoned, it means you're old. What I talk about also is what I call heritage technology, which is the same thing as old technology. So I'm old. I've been asked to cover two things today. One is much easier than the second. The first thing I've been asked to cover is innovative technologies shaping the future of banking operations. That's quite easy. I've got one slide. It's called Gen AI, Cloud, Third Gen, blah, blah, blah. The more difficult thing I've been asked to speak about, which if I knew the answer to, you'd all have my book and it'd be signed, and I'd be on the lecture circuit, is strategies for the seamless integration of digital solutions into banking. The seamless word stopped me in my tracks, because I don't know how you do it seamlessly. So let's have a discussion, and let me just share with you some of my thoughts and some of the ways we are thinking about this at Absa. But if you take one message from me today, if you're in technology, you need to become your bank's digital transformation partner. If you're not in technology, you need to insist that your technology function becomes a transformation partner, because it's the only way you'll succeed. Okay. Let me see if I can work the clicker. Okay, animation, good. So I want to I want to discuss the second topic first. This seamless, how do you do it seamlessly? Let's stand back and think about this. The world we live in is going through a rate of change that only gets faster. I think it was 2018, Justin Trudeau said that at the World Economic Forum. You'll be able to quote him better than me. Something like the pace of change will never be as slow again as it is today. And we live in that world, don't we? We're just all now beginning to understand Gen AI. I'm sure you've just explained to your board what Gen AI is. Large language models. Now people are talking about small language models, fine-tuned models, all of this stuff. You've all now just wished you'd invested in NVIDIA. NVIDIA stock price, look at what happened to it. And then, of course, Microsoft are now going to partner with someone else on chips. So the reality of our world is this rate of change is just accelerating. Our problem is the human ability in an organizational system, like an Absa, like any other big business. I think it's a bit unfair on my slide to say we are dipping before we're going up, but there's definitely a gap opening, and I hope you agree with me on that. So then the question is, if you live in this world with increasing rate of change, your customer expectations, by the way, are much more like this than this, yet your organizational ability to change is not like this. How do you close the gap? Because if you don't, what's going to happen? I would suggest you cease to exist. So one of the questions I always get asked is, where do you start on digital transformation? And my answer is, you've already started. Because if you're in an organization in 2024 that hasn't started on digital transformation, you've already ceased to exist. Now, the question will be, is it fast enough? How do you get faster? And all of this. And this is maybe where my second message might help. You know, at Absa, one of the things that we spent a lot of time on last year, I only joined the bank last year, was really to say, the point of digital transformation is actually to create value. Why are you doing it? You're not doing it to have the most modern technology. Might be a byproduct. You're doing it because you want to create value for your customers, your colleagues, your shareholders. And this is really, really important, because one of the things people in technology often fixate on is the tech. And when you do that, you miss 80% of what gets you to this, how do you digitally transform? And of course, when you think about it, yeah, you need new products and segments. Of course you do. Yeah, you need new business models. Yeah, you've got to revamp and improve. Bad news, you've got to do all of them. So, the closest thing I've got to an answer on seamless is on the next slide. You'll be massively disappointed. I'll just tell you in advance. But it's the way we think about it, and it's the way I've thought about this for quite a number of years. There are only two messages I want to leave you with on this slide. The first thing I want to leave you with is, conceptually, you cannot transform your current state into your future state. I'll repeat, you cannot transform it. You're going to say to me, but Johnson, most banks, European banks, average age of core banking system, 47 years old. I've got some 40-plus-year-old mainframe systems in Absa. What do you mean, Johnson, you can't? What I mean is there's a very different mindset you apply in a digital world from what I call a heritage world. And you've got to understand that as you start on this journey or as you continue this journey. So I talk a lot about the first thing you need to do to really start to get this infusion of digital into your culture is understand that your management, your leadership, your thinking approach on what I call heritage is different from digital. The two coexist. And actually what you're trying to do is you're managing one for today and trying to run it down, and you're building up the second. And that's a hugely complex task. It's very easy when Johnson draws his slide, one goes down, one goes up. But it's a mindset that I really would urge you all to have. So then you get into practicalities, but Johnson, I have to integrate all my various systems, and the answer is yes. I would then say to you, how you think about doing it is the thing that makes the difference. Then the second thing on the slide, again, I told you no great revelations here. And the reason I say every bank has started on digital transformation is we've all started to digitalize customer journeys, every one of us. And it's actually the right place to start, because you have to start outside in. If you try and do it inside out, you'll be at it for longer. I'll be beyond seasoned. And we've all done that. And that very deliberate strategy here, where you start to shrink what I call heritage, is really important. Then, of course, you get into your core operations. And again, we're all doing that. You've got contact centers, you're automating them, CRM systems, et cetera, et cetera. We're making our employees a lot more efficient. We've all got Copilot. We're all beginning to use it. And then my caution to you, and sorry to any CIOs in the room, be very selective about how you modernize. So this argument that you have to modernize your entire tech stack before you start, and you'll be at it for forever. So at least the way I think about this and the way we're trying to think about it in Absa is customers make choices today. Experience matters. It matters an awful lot. You need to be very good at this. Your colleagues interact with your customers. You need to be very good at it. Because what's the biggest influencer on your customer? Going to be your colleagues. Your technology is your technology. Be very deliberate about your sequencing and your phasing of the modernization. And if you do that in a 1, 2, 3, I personally believe you start to make progress. And again, it's a game of progress. Go back to my first slide. Change is doing that. What you're trying to do is increase your rate of adoption of change in your organization. So that's my PhD thesis over. I've got 11 minutes. The next slide is the easiest slide. So I'll be honest. I went on to Gen AI, and I said, tell me the top 8 trends influencing technology on the African continent. I changed a couple, but what's spooky is this is largely Gen AI generated. That's what's spooky. I started by saying this is the easiest part for me to talk about. I won't go through all 8 of them, but let me just talk about 2 of them. I think I'm talking a lot about this. I think we all get it. Your boards get it. Your executives get it. I think for us on the continent, there are a couple of really interesting ones, and I'm going to start down here. You know, I was thinking about this. I think it's probably fair to say on the African continent, we've got the largest percentage of our population unbanked. I would have said India until about 3-4 years ago when the payment solution was implemented, and all of a sudden India had 500 million more bank accounts. So I think for those of us in banking on the continent, using technology to be able to get to a greater proportion of our population at a cost-efficient rate is critically important. And of course, a number of these other things tie into it, because you'll need to use AI, you'll need to use cloud, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's certainly one area of technology that I would look at. It's the right thing for the continent. It's the right thing for the countries in the continent. To sell it the right thing for customers. And clearly, as a bank, you want to, grow that. So that's one I would pick up on. The other one I think which is probably coming our way quite quickly is going to be this open banking. You can tell by my accent where I'm from. It was really interesting to see the transition in UK banking when open banking came in. Really interesting. And if you look at what is happening on our continent and the way a number of our regulators are thinking, I think there's real value here. And of course, as a bank, it opens you up to ecosystems. And we'll get into this world where one day I'll be your competitor, the other day I'll be your partner. If you look at how an Amazon operates, it's classic. And so I think that's coming our way as well. The one thing that isn't on this slide, which in my view is coming quicker than we think, is quantum computing. About 3 years ago, I started thinking about this. And it seemed very far-fetched, and I would have said to you it's 10 years out. The more I look at it, the more I see it coming earlier. I spent time with IBM in January, and I don't understand. Don't ask me any questions on quantum mechanics, I have no idea. But when you start to listen to how they're thinking, and you imagine particularly this on quantum, your mind just starts to... If I've got an extrapolated rate of change at the moment, imagine what happens there. So I don't know if it's next year or the year after, but personally I would be surprised if by 2030 we didn't have quantum computing commercialized. IBM's already released 2 quantum computers. There's a Chinese company that's already released basically a handheld quantum computer. So, as I said, this is not the technology trends are not a particularly difficult slide to draw. Right, okay, in closing, because I'm really keen to get some questions. To try and answer the 2 questions I was asked to do a keynote on, the first thing I'm going to say is seamless. I don't know you can do it. The pace of the technology change is no longer our limitation. It's actually the pace at which we can adapt. And that's a very interesting conundrum. If you're in technology, you need to help your organization do that. The days when technology people could stand and say, I just do IT, gone, which is why I talk about you have to be the digital transformation partner. Mentally, I argue, you cannot transform your heritage to your future. Practically, it's a lot more difficult, of course, but mentally, if you keep that framework, it certainly helps me, because when you make choices then about how you invest, what you choose to invest in, it really helps you. All technology investment, I'm fixated on this, must be business value focused. Otherwise, you end up poorer with fantastic tech, which is not a good place to be. The challenge, having said all of this, is you can see the rate of technology change. It is just exploding. There's no sign it's going to stop. And I will close by almost where I started. My one piece of advice to you, if you're in technology, you need to be a digital transformation partner. If you're not in technology, you need to get your team to act in that way. Thank you. That's all I had. I've got still 6 minutes and 4 seconds. So I'm hoping I've sparked some questions. You're too kind. Please.
Thanks, Johnson. Warren, good talk, provoker. Just on the trends, perhaps for you, maybe this rolled up to one of the other themes that you had there, but I didn't see conversational commerce, right? And the reason why I point to that is because I believe implicitly in the comment that you made in relation to it's not the rate of change in tech, it's the rate of adoption. So that points to that the technology and that adoption taking place on the channel, right? And if we look at behaviorally what's happened in terms of the adoption of mobile banking and other devices that follow people is the language I use. Why not conversational commerce?
Because Gen AI didn't tell me it. No. No, to be honest, because I wanted 8, but I also agree with you, conversational commerce is critically important. You can see it. What's happening is our reputations are now at what I call the edge. So as a bank, your reputation is at the edge on the device. So of course, conversational commerce there is a critical component of that. Yeah. Okay. I had to do it in one slide. I tried to do it in one slide because my rationale was if the second question was harder, the first one was easier. So you caught me out.
No, fair enough.
And of course, Gen AI and conversational commerce, you start to go, okay, right, this is also, you can see how these things sort of, they create a multiplier effect, can't you, when you start to think about them. Okay, that's my award gone, because I didn't cover that. Please.
Also Warren from Wipro. I guess my question is around the need for a tipping point and where that tipping point is. I think everybody in the room is involved with transforming to digital.
Yeah.
But I think the brutal reality of our organizations that we work for and you work with is there hasn't really been a fundamental change. So where's this tipping point that's going to push and drive in light of organizations that are now coming to market with a cost of onboarding that is 5% of the traditional bank's cost of onboarding. So where would that tipping point be that's going to move banks beyond a comfort zone into an accelerated change?
Yeah. Interestingly, just last Wednesday, we had a discussion at the Absa Group Exco. It was about digital transformation, but one of the things we ended up talking about is to break that cycle I talked about of your pace of change is slower, is you actually have to unfreeze your organization. And to unfreeze your organization, the pressure to change has got to be greater than the resistance to change. In old change language, you need a burning platform. So the question, of course, is how do you create that? So I think for every organization, it's different, but it's going to start with what you as a leader believe. And when people ask me this question, here, I very often, you've heard me refer to India. The other area I look at is Latin America. Look at New Bank and how quickly they've got to 100 million customers. Now, it's happened it's happened on our planet. So you've got to sit and think this is going to happen on the African continent as well. And then the final thing, which I think it's a much slower, but again on the continent we have to realize is a really strong force, is the demographic of our population. By a long way, we're the youngest not me, we're the youngest population continent on the planet. And the blunt truth is, someone starting their working life now is not going to come to my branch and sit with me for 45 minutes to get a credit card. It's just not going to happen. So, again, if I knew the answer to that question, I would publish my book, but I would say you have to be very deliberate about creating a stronger force to change than the resistance. You have to keep an eye on what you see happening across the globe because there are definitely examples where you see this explosion. I was talking to one of the big banks in India, and they told me after the payment solution went in, their transaction rates went up, was it 100 times? And you just sit and think, wow, how would my infrastructure cope with that kind? So you need leaders who think like that. And then back to my point on value, that's a big problem. You have to show value as quickly as you can because that will build success. Please.
Good morning, and thank you for the riveting and timely talk. I suppose my question is more, it's more of a fundamental question, because when you listen and follow folks like Ray Kurzweil, people who are very advanced within the AI understanding, there's always an issue around the human inability to actually not only adapt to, but to actually perceive exponential growth. So that concerns me deeply, particularly when we consider the importance of adapting to the change. And when you look at some of the models where the rate of growth is almost vertical, I become even more concerned. And I wonder, is it even possible for us to reach a point of symmetry? And more philosophically, I suppose, is there hope? Please give me some hope from an African perspective, particularly from an African perspective. Is there hope? Thank you.
Excellent question. If I can take a couple minutes that my time allows. Is there hope? I firmly believe absolutely yes, there is hope. I firmly believe that technology actually for us in Africa is the opportunity to leapfrog. Why do I say that? It's becoming more and more democratized. Yes, when these things come out, they're relatively expensive. The cost rate goes down really quickly. We mustn't underestimate that I will speak for Europe and North America, organizations are far less agile and resilient than an organization is on the African continent. So for me, there is absolute hope. Then you get onto the question of skills, because we need to create the skills, and I'm going to use a very strong word here, that can exploit this technology. Which is why you see in our own small way in Absa, we invest in things like cyber academies, digital academies, data academies. This is really critical. I would urge everyone in the room to do that. Because, the last thing we should do is undersell ourselves. To the rate of this change, when you stand back and think about it, you can get yourself actually, quite sober. I say two things. Whenever anyone asks me, Johnson, what's the most critical skill? My answer is the same, adaptability. That's the world I live in today. When I started work, you went in, did a master's or something, and then you learned, I wouldn't even, Informix or COBOL, that's how old I am. Nowadays, that doesn't matter, because today will be this, tomorrow will be that. And therefore, I say to people in technology in Absa, remember, the reason we really need you in the bank is first and foremost, you subscribe to our purpose, our values, our culture. Then I need you to understand technology and be able to solve business problems. And my final point on this rate of change, there's also a lot of hype in tech. We hype things up immensely. Gen AI is at the peak of its hype. It really is now. It will crash down, and then in time it will come out. I would just say to you, be aware of that, ride the storm, and the more deliberate you are about the technology and what you're going to use it for, I think you can better manage it's exponential, it's vertical change, is it not? So, as with everything I say, I don't have the perfect answer, but that's certainly how I do think about it. I think we must be hopeful. I think it comes down to skills. I think we can build the skills on the continent. I go back to my point about our population. I think all our corporates doing that, we each do our bit, all of a sudden you have a multiplier effect. And technology has become the great leveler. And organizations outside the African continent, maybe with the exception of China and India, are not able to adapt. So despite what I say about speed of change and adaptability, there's an adaptability and resilience we have on the continent that certainly, in North America, Europe, organizations don't have. Okay. Have I outstayed my welcome?
The practicalities of organizational politics and how it affects the adoption of new technologies. In particular, you talk about this force. If there's the force advocating for change greater than the one advocating for preservation of current technologies, then, we've got upward momentum. So, what is your experience at Absa in respect of the politics around incentivizing or a situation where executives are incentivized, to preserve essentially current business models versus creating future business models?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I joined Absa, if you look at Absa and where we are, we've just come out of the separation from Barclays. We're obviously building our new identity. That's a golden opportunity to reflect on who you are and what you're trying to become. One of the reasons I joined Absa is even if you look at our Group Exco, if I'm running a business unit, particularly in 2023 and 2024 in this macro, it's all about the numbers. So I talk about horizons. But when you have in Absa, the group people officer, the group technology officer, or the CIO, the marketing officer, working alongside the business units, what you've done is created deliberate tension, but tension that you can manage. So one of the things, that we're doing in Absa today, I talk about horizons. Horizon 1 is 2024. You've got to meet your numbers. Then you get into Horizon 2, which is 25 to 27, and you need to think about a level of investment you insist on that, because that comes on you very quickly, and if you keep doing what you're doing, you're not going to succeed. And then there's Horizon 3. So I think it's important structurally to answer your question. You have mechanisms where leadership teams can deal with this, because when you stand back and think about it, I'm privileged to be on the ExCo of Absa. It has clearly to be sustainable in 24, but equally you want it here in 10, 20 years. And you have to always have that balance. So let's focus on strategy, and continuing an element of investment in your strategy is really important. So is it painful? Yes. Is it constantly compromising? Yes. As you go through the change process, do you sometimes tilt that, to orient? Yes. So again, back to my adaptability word, you need an awful lot of it. But structure matters. Leadership and thinking matters. Balance in the short and the long term also does matter. And of course, incentives do matter, as you're pointing out. And then you get into a whole debate about how do you align STIs and long-term incentives and things like that. It's a compromise, I think, is the short answer to your question. Okay. I hope that's been at least of some interest. Thank you for giving me some time.
Before you go, I think you did get it. Congratulations.